Hello friends, welcome back to the Walkthrough Crew, Cycle 156. This is video number 7, and let's start where we always start by looking at the number of duplicates we have. I now have 11. Of course I can do this because I have the food and the oxygen to support that, and the resources that I really need to keep up on. My coal is rising. My algae is getting a little low. I'm probably going to need to go make a couple of dives into slime, but eventually we're going to need to get on oxygen that does not require algae. Probably be doing that maybe within the next 100 cycles or so, maybe a little bit less. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, let's pick up on a couple of things that I mentioned from the last video. So what we were doing is we were unveiling vents, and I didn't show what this one was. It's a hot polluted oxygen vent, so anybody that was watching that last one was like, oh, you forgot one. That's what it is. It's not very good. It puts up hot polluted oxygen at like 932 Fahrenheit. You can make it a setup like this to gather energy from it, but then you have 300-ish degree polluted oxygen sitting around, and there's not a whole lot to do with that, so I guess you could blow it into space or something like that. This is one of the worst vents in the game, so I'm probably not going to do anything with it. And then this leaky oil fissure. I felt bad immediately when I was like, I don't know, don't use it, whatever. I'm going to make it a point to use it this game because there is a lot of energy in this, both in the heat and in the oil that comes out, but the setup is going to be really weird. And I have to be honest and say that I've usually just left these things buried because I've never felt a big reason to unearth them when I can unearth volcanoes or steam vents or hydrogen vents or something like that and get energy off of them. I can get energy off of this, I just kind of don't know what it's going to look like. So it's going to look a little bit strange. I'll try to get that up here sometime in the mid to late-ish game area, but yeah. Let's talk about the bigger systems that are coming up right now. You see this big block is full of natural gas. That's because I've captured 2 of my natural gas geysers, and yes, there was a 4th one over here. So among these 2, I now have 2, or one of them is flowing because it's not dormant anymore. The second one will be active in a couple of cycles, maybe even within the scope of this video. So I have this pumping in, it's coming into this room, it's coming into this vent more specifically. I'm eventually going to want to replace this with a high pressure vent, but I need plastic in order to do that first. So that will come up here pretty soon. For right now, this is plenty. You could also use a bunch of gas reservoirs to store this in. I kind of don't like this as much because on a lot of maps this is really hard to come by a lot of metal. And this can drain a lot of your metal if you need to store a lot of this natural gas. You also do want a tank to store this, by the way, just because you don't want to only rely on the tiny amount that's going to be sitting in here and the tiny amount that's going to be sitting in the pipes. When your geysers are active, they're going to be putting out probably a lot more than you can consume. So I have just a storage area here. The materials that are being used here, everything that's touching natural gas and trying to keep it in a certain place is made out of ceramic. And you can check what's good and bad to use as insulated tile if you check out the properties here. So you want something with a low thermal conductivity and hopefully a low specific heat capacity. I believe obsidian's a little bit better than this, and there's also one other material just basically called insulation that's better than both of those, but insulation's super late game, and obsidian's usually a little hard to come by, especially on this starting map. So yeah, check out these values if you want to know what's going to be good for both conducting heat and preventing heat transfer. Yeah. The pump inside is made out of steel, and that's because it can resist any temperature up to 527 Fahrenheit, and this will only come out at 302. So inside this room is going to be really hot. You can see it's 259 degrees Fahrenheit. That's well above a boiling point. And same goes for this. This is going to get really hot too. It's already about 195, 200. That's getting close to boiling. So you want to be able to contain this heat as much as you possibly can inside here by using these ceramic tiles. Or obsidian if you have enough of it. Yeah, so we have natural gas up and running. It just flows into these natural gas generators. I connect them to a separate battery, by the way, and that is so I can decide how I want to use my resources. So for example, if the natural gas gets too full in here, I can start changing these values to make it use natural gas more aggressively. Generally, the higher I make these values, the more aggressively I'm going to use the resource that it's asking for. Same goes in inverse. If I want to use less of it, I can just make these really low, like 60 or 0, for example. It's something I'll do for like my petroleum generators because I don't want to use a bunch of energy on petroleum, but we'll get to that later. And of course, make sure they're connected on separate automation grids so that you can control them separately. So yeah, that about does it for natural gas. Let's talk about this room that just came up. I talked about this before. This is something that I do. You don't have to do it this way if you don't want to. But I do it this way so I can contain all of my big heat producers and all of my big carbon dioxide, polluted water producers, all that kind of stuff in one place, and just manage them in one room. The biggest reason why I started to put this up right now is because these kilns exist, and every time I run these kilns, it gets really hot in this room. So if you look at the temperature overlay, anything that's in like the greenish area is about room temperature. Anything that's yellow is a little bit warmer than that, and red is like 100 degrees plus. So this is starting to be like 100, 105. This is the kind of stuff where, like, if you know of a hot place, like in the world, say like a desert or something, these are temperatures where you'd go outside and be like, yeah, this is too hot, I need to stay inside. So yeah, this is getting pretty toasty in here. So what I'm setting up is this chamber right here. This is going to be my cooling area, and this is going to be filled with polluted water and cooled by polluted ice for the time being. There's going to be a solution later that we switch to that's not ice, because we're going to eventually run out. But the idea here is to have a whole bunch of cold polluted water, and this polluted water can go really cold, just based upon this ice. So I'm going to use this for a little while, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up with one liquid pump, and I'm going to snake some pipe all the way through this room. And I'm going to have a liquid shutoff here at the end of it. And you might ask, why at the end and not at the beginning? That's because when I connect this up, I want water to basically be sitting in these pipes until I want to empty it and cycle it back out. If it's sitting in these pipes, it's just going to make these pipes cooler for longer. And I'm also going to use an extremely low amount of power if this pump is only on, say, like 10% of the time, as opposed to 100% of the time. So, yeah, so we're going to go ahead and fill this up with some cool polluted water. As this comes in here, it's going to cool the pipe, which is then going to cool the things around it. And I chose to make this out of sedimentary rock. For best results, you'd probably make this out of a material that is going to conduct heat a lot better, or rather conduct any temperature exchange better, which is like a radiant liquid pipe. But this requires refined metals, so I'm not going to use that for right now. I'll probably replace this a little bit later if I feel the need to. So yeah, we're filling up the pipes here, and what I'm going to do on this liquid shutoff is I'm going to add a sensor, which is going to just be a timer sensor. You can hook this up to whatever you want. You could hook it up to a temperature sensor, or do it manually, or whatever. But the idea here is that I'm going to turn this on every so often, and when I leave it on, I want to cycle out all the room in this water to get fresh water pumped from here. And then I'm going to send all the warmed water that's been absorbing the heat from all this stuff back into the tank to be recooled. So I'll set this up to be, the green should be how long it's about going to take me to flush the room. So let's say, I don't know, 90 seconds. And the red's going to be how long it just sits in the room and absorbs heat. So let's just guess here and say like 500. I don't know. Seems a little bit extreme, but this polluted water can take a lot of abuse in terms of how much heat it can absorb. So I'm just going to keep it in these pipes for a really long time. And eventually the pipes are going to be about the same temperature as the water. So if this whole room is running at about like 50 degrees, which is what this is at right now, then I'm really happy with that. That's great for me. This polluted water is also so powerful that I can cool almost anything with it. And this is also why when we were talking about the thermonullifier before, which is right here, I haven't dug it out yet. The thermonullifier is so much more expensive than this polluted water setup. It's also way less effective, so if you can get something like this set up, I'd really recommend this like 10 times out of 10 before I'd recommend something like this. I've never heard of a map in which you will get a thermonullifier and not polluted ice, so considering the polluted ice is just so much easier to work with and it's so much more powerful, I think I'd rather just use that rather than touching the thermonullifier at all. So obviously this is totally up to you. That's just my advice. Polluted water is probably the best thing for cooling in the game. At least for cooling things that you're not expecting to like freeze solid. So yeah, let's start talking about creating steel. So like I mentioned in here, these things are made out of steel. And as I mentioned in a previous video, I got the steel from mining out some stuff up here. Oh, there's a little pocket of steel. It always does this. I don't understand why. But I got the steel from deconstructing these windows and this front door on these ruins. And that gave me enough steel to produce a whole bunch of gas pipes and stuff. But if you don't have that yet, you can get into your research to start producing it, which is going to be this metal refinery. The problem with that, well, it's kind of a problem, but the tax on that is that every time you produce steel, it's going to require lime. And lime is a resource, and not slime, by the way, lime. Lime is a resource that you're only going to get from a handful of sources. It's going to be from these Pokeshell molts, from these guys. You can try to ranch these, but they eat really weird stuff like polluted dirt and rot piles. You're not going to have a lot of that going around, so I don't really ranch those very much. You can get it from Fossil, which, spoiler alert, is going to be down here. We're going to be looking in this biome here in a little bit. Or you can get it from eggshells, and that's usually the easiest place to get it, which is going to be every time a critter leaves an egg and that egg hatches, it's going to leave an eggshell here. By the way, I want to keep these stone hatches. They're finally hatching. So what I'm going to need if I'm going to want to produce a lot of steel, and steel is something that I want to produce for a whole bunch of random things, but the biggest thing is eventually getting it into space. I'm going to need a lot of eggshells. So in the next video, I'm going to be talking about a couple of things that are going to be involving increasing my ranching just a little bit to get a head start on my eggshells, because I'm going to need a whole bunch of them by the later stages of the game. I'm also going to be completing my ventilation, which you can see it was down here, which is where we moved it before, and this is all nice and breathable, all the way down until right below where this pump actually is placed. And then I'm going to move this ventilation down to its final resting place, which is here, because this is going to be about the entrance to my oil biome, and that's as far down as I want to go. This oil biome is also going to be something we're going to be entering in the next video, and that's because this oil is the key to doing a lot of things that are going to kind of push you towards like the mid-game area. This is going to allow us to start producing a lot of plastic. It's going to solve a lot of our bigger energy demands as we start to add more complicated energy requesters. So yeah, that's what's going to be coming up in the next video. Let me check around really fast and make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Yeah, I don't think so. You can see I've dug out a lot of the base by now, and it's cycle 159, and this is about where I'd like to see every base be. If you don't know where everything is on the map by now, then I think you should really devote some people to mining and just dig out a lot of different things. So yeah, that's where the base stands for right now. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down in the comment section. I will get to them. I'll see you in the next video here pretty soon. Hopefully not as wide of a gap as last time, but I don't know. We'll see. It'll come up when it's ready, so have a good one in the meantime.